Hey everyone, I'm Amethescent, and today I will be continuing from my last video where I redrew some of my old art. If you haven't watched it already and want to see what I drew last time, then feel free to check it out after you watch this one. Link will be in the description below, as well as the end card. So I found this evil scientist lady in my stack of old drawings, and when I showed this to some people, one of them said that she didn't look evil at all, that she looked nice and cute, and, well, they're wrong. See these tiny mad-looking eyebrows and this devious, gleeful smile? That is obviously a clear indication of her evilness. More on how definitely evil and not cute she is later. For this piece, I really wanted there to be some kind of visual gimmick, like maybe she uses gigantic, oversized potions, or something like that. But I really couldn't come up with anything great, not visually at least. And I had trouble coming up with anything interesting for a backstory as well, unlike last time when ideas poured out of my mind like a rushing waterfall. But I really needed to move forward, so I started on the drawing process. It took a while for me to find a pose that I liked, but when I did, I couldn't choose between two different options. Big thanks to my brother for posing and helping me brainstorm ideas. Both poses you see drawn in here were inspired by him. After I finished drawing a sketch of both, I eventually decided on the second pose. So, round about halfway through the drawing, I finally had a flash of inspiration for her backstory. You see, long before I started drawing, I was a writer, and throughout the years, I wrote a lot. This even includes a book draft that I set aside for something bigger, but I haven't given up on it entirely. Occasionally, I revisit it as a fun manga project, reworking the lore and world building along the way. So why am I telling you this? Well, occasionally I add in some new characters into the world that I think would fit, and I decided to do something similar with this character. Most characters that I insert into this world are minor, but the story I came up with this one definitely isn't. However, in order to fully understand it, I have to give some insight into the world of Elindria. In the world of Elindria, magic is prevalent, from the tiniest blade of grass to the largest dragon, and the sorcerers of the world are the most powerful of the magical creatures. But that wasn't always the case. You see, before the days when a simple flick of the hand could conjure up a magical spell, people had no magic within them at all. Instead, they had to rely on alchemy, a sort of synthetic magic. Unlike most other magical creatures, like the light nymphs who could bend light with a touch of their palm, or the basilisks who could turn a victim to stone with a single glance, humans needed a catalyst. And, well, let's just say that the art of potion making was not the easiest thing at the time. Not only was the practice extremely unstable and dangerous, but it was also exceptionally complicated. So much so that a lot of alchemy resulted in an untimely demise. One required not only a doctorate in the craft, but also a rare, hard-to-obtain license in order to practice it legally. All of this, rightfully, scared many away from pursuing this dangerous career. Very few were crazy enough to tackle it, but the few who did, and who managed to survive, typically made a fortune selling their products. And Dr. Vilmore was the craziest and most genius of them all. She was so effective at her job that the government would often pay her a handsome amount for, let's just say, some powerful concoctions. And she would happily use those funds to further her important research. Dr. Vilmore was a rather clumsy doctor, and that was mostly due to her excitement over her craft. She wasn't exactly the most professional. It wasn't uncommon for her to forego lab safety precautions, such as putting her hair up or wearing safety goggles. She also tended to run around her lab as she eagerly gathered everything she needed for her next concoction. And this would generally lead to her tripping and falling on her face, often while holding some of her potions. Miraculously, she never suffered any lasting injuries, only inspiration, as her frequent tumbles regularly led to intriguing new elixir combinations. But anyway, Dr. Vilmore's research was particularly focused on the ability to infuse magic into one's very soul, to allow one to be able to use magic without requiring potions. She would spend a good majority of her time locked up in her lab trying to conjure up a solution. and it was not uncommon for her to test her experiments on herself. This would result in her hair and eyes starting to change into a more unnatural color, and some internal powers starting to form. On a bit of a side note, in the world of modern Alindria, the magic users naturally have colored hair and eyes that wouldn't be considered natural in real life, like blue and purple and red. From a behind-the-scenes standpoint, old me chose this because I didn't want to be limited to just natural hair and eye colors. So that's why the sorcerers in this world have unusually colored hair and eyes. Lore-wise, I like to think that these are a physical manifestation of their internal magic. But back to Dr. Vilmore. The powers she gained weren't enough. Her powers were apparent, yes, but they were small. They weren't good enough to be a viable replacement for her potions. And no matter what she did or tried, she could never exceed what she had accomplished so far. She would have to extract it from another source. Something living. Something powerful. If only she could just find another subject from a different species. Something or someone highly intelligent and powerful. Perhaps then she could figure out some alternate means to get the power she so desperately wanted to achieve. I won't go into too much when it comes to what she did, but let's just say that she was successful. And in modern times, magic is now ingrained into a sorcerer's very soul, allowing them to conjure up magic with just a flick of their hand. And yes, Dr. Vilmore is the type of evil scientist who laughs maniacally. So, here's the final product. I'm a little bit surprised with how the backstory came out, as it makes a dramatic change to what I originally had for the world building of my book, which was nothing. Before, that was just how sorcerers always were, that they could always use magic. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep this lore in the long run, or if I'll discard it for something else. But for now, it works. The next character I'll be drawing is this one. If you look closely, you'll see that her name is Ash, spelled with an extra C for no reason. That's how you know she's cool. Looking at the old drawing, I knew I was going for some kind of foul-tempered, bad girl vibe, but that's pretty much all I got from it. Not really much to go off of. I didn't want to go for the typical delinquent or gangster archetype, but I wasn't sure what else to go with for her. So I started to scroll through Pinterest for some ideas when I came across this picture that I really liked. And that was when I started having the idea of making her some kind of vigilante or anti-hero. I thought it would be much more interesting than making her a troubled, foul-mouthed delinquent who gets into fights and smokes like the usual cliche. As you can probably tell, I really liked the look of the reference and tried to draw something similar. I especially wanted to imitate her expression because it just looked so serious and focused. I'm not sure how well I accomplished that. I also really struggled with the pose, specifically the top portion of it, with the head, the neck, and the arms. I kept feeling like it looked awkward and anatomically incorrect. In the end, I still think it looks a bit awkward, but it's good enough. By now, you can probably tell that I kept her design more or less the same, except for the hair, as I put Ash's hair up in a ponytail instead of just letting it flow freely. This is partly due to the fact that a lot of my old characters had long, free-flowing hair, which isn't all that interesting or diverse, and I wanted to do something different. Not that there's anything wrong with long, free-flowing hair, it just gets boring after a while. So I put her hair up in a ponytail, and that was also partially inspired by the reference. Now, allow me to talk more about what I came up with for Ash. Ash grew up in a not-so-great neighborhood, raised solely by an older dad that rarely paid her any attention. Instead, he dedicated a lot of his time and money to a gambling addiction, hoping to make it big someday. He never did. And all of this put him in a lot of debt with a criminal organization that he had borrowed a lot of money from. Even so, he kept gambling himself further and further into a pit of despair as he desperately tried to win enough money to pay off what he was due. And all the stress and worry eventually led him to pass away. But that debt didn't just go away, and so it was passed on to Ash. So not only did she have to deal with being homeless and being left without a parental figure, but she also had to figure out a way to pay off the debt. And she had to do it fast, for the criminal organization wasn't exactly known for being kind. So Ash did whatever she could to scrape up any kind of money she could find, in fear for her life. But that wasn't enough either, and the debt had interest. There's always interest. Ash was running out of options. Luckily for her, a sort of vigilante organization aimed at stopping crime was able to get in contact with her. They saw her raw potential and were willing to pay her a constant and hefty paycheck if she were to join them and help them achieve their goals, with some training, of course. Ash agreed, but not necessarily because she agreed with what they did, but was driven by good morals. Her reasons were completely selfish. Nevertheless, she proved to be invaluable to the Vigilante group when she was trained in self-defense and the use of firearms. Ash is the kind of person who doesn't take orders from anyone except from a select few higher-ups that she deeply respects. But her respect is purely professional, as she's the kind of person who works alone and sees no purpose in relationships other than those that are functional. Once her debt is fully paid off, she'll have no qualms just leaving. At least, that's what she believes. She's also not afraid to break a few rules in order to achieve her tasks, which is partially why the Vigilante group values her so much. Not many are as willing to do what she does. Despite all this, Ash isn't the type to actively look for a fight, but she won't back down from a challenge either. And that's all I have for her. Here's the final product. I'm not too excited about it. It's not bad, but it isn't amazing either. I can't help but feel like something's missing, whether it's the colors or the background. But I digress. I still like it. I just don't love it. So anyway, that's all I have for you today. Here are the drawings again. I was originally going to do 3 artworks, with the third one being for this old drawing. But I was getting kind of burnt out, and I wasn't sure what to do for her. If you're interested in seeing her reimagined in a future video, and have some ideas for her, feel free to let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already to see more of my content. Take care and farewell.